So if you're saying, yeah, Brandon, I want to get better at curiosity, the starting place is asking good questions. Maybe you're not quite ready to, do what I just did and kind of lean in and ask questions and reflect back and ask more questions about what you heard. Although everyone should practice that on a date night. It's really powerful. Here's some great business questions. So let's say you've got a direct report who's been on your team. Maybe they've been on your team a couple of years. Maybe they're still pretty new. Great question to ask. What is something about you that I don't know that I probably should? This is the Leadership Boundary Podcast. I'm your host this week, Brandon Smith. And this week, we're going to take on a theme that keeps popping up in our conversations. And the theme is curiosity. So more specifically, I'm going to talk today with my colleague and co-host, Whitney Mendoza. Whitney, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I'm very curious about this conversation.
Very punny, Whitney. Very punny. So we're going to talk about curiosity today, but we're going to talk specifically about how do you do it. We spend all this time talking about curiosity and saying, we need to be curious. Great leaders are curious. Great young professionals are curious. In relationships, we're curious about our significant other. Okay, that sounds good and well. But so many people don't do this effectively. So we're going to talk about how do we do this more effectively. So I'm really, really excited about this, Whitney, because I consider myself a pretty curious guy. Came a lot from my upbringing, ironically, because my parents were not curious. So I spent my entire life growing up with them not really interested in my needs, my wants, my feelings. We just kind of walked around the house silently together. So it was really important to me that I gave that to other people because I saw how much I didn't have that. So I went off and got my therapy degree and majored in communications in undergrad. So I spent my whole life on developing these skills. And so I take it for granted. I often say, well, gosh, just be more curious. But that's not fair. There are some things we need to be doing. So when you think about curiosity, Whitney, either best practices or challenges, what initially comes to mind for you?
So when we were talking a little bit about this off camera and I saw you writing questions and I got curious as to what your questions were. Part of what comes down to curiosity to me is it really is a communication line back and forth, right? Even if you're not the one speaking, one of the points I brought up was giving cues that you are listening. So again, listening to actually hear, not listening to respond. So I notice often what I do is I'm almost like a rock out head nodder that I constantly am head nodding and I just do it naturally. At least I feel like I do it naturally somewhere. Maybe it developed kind of like you were talking about in your story, but I head nod to let somebody know that I'm paying attention to them. And I feel like that indirectly encourages them to continue speaking and continue sharing with me. I feel like it makes them feel comfortable, and it also validates what they're saying because I'm showing them I'm actually listening to you. I'm not looking over your shoulder. I'm not looking at my watch, my phone. I'm just looking right at you and listening to what you have to say.
Beautiful. So what I love where you took this conversation is you really helped set up why this is so important. Because we can do that active listening. We can do prompts that encourage people to talk, and that's great. They'll talk, but we're not really guiding it because we're not asking questions. We're just nodding and they're just talking to us, right? They're telling us a bunch of stuff. They're kind of a free flow of thoughts and ideas. That's not bad. That's good. But when I'm thinking about curiosity, I think what I hadn't really put words around until you said that was it's a way to actively go in for information that you are interested in. And by doing so, the person experiences you as empathetic. So it's a win-win. You get information that you want, you learn something, and they say, gosh, this person really is interested in me. So I'll tell kind of a brief story to set this up. So a few years ago, I was doing work in this particular division I was working with. It was part of a large financial services organization. And this division had undergone a bunch of mergers and acquisitions. In fact, 4 of them over a 4-year period.
Oh, wow.
So the president said to me, he said, I really don't know what kind of division we have here. Can you help out? I said, sure. So I did all these interviews, interviewing people about the culture and what they like or don't like. And I go back to him with a big report. And I said, all right, here's the report. I'm going to go over it line item with you, line item by line item. But the bottom line is this. Everyone said, you're a really empathetic leader. Well, I expected him to say, oh, that's great news, because who doesn't want to hear they're an empathetic leader?
Right.
Well, he'd come from an investment banking background, so he was kind of trained to be kind of no nonsense, and he thought of himself as a kind of very serious investment banker type. And he kind of looked at me and he scratched his head and he said, I don't mean to be rude, but I don't think I'm curious at all or empathetic at all, is what he said. I'll tie it into curiosity in a minute. And he said, look, work is work, personal is personal. I don't want to talk about personal stuff at work. I only want to talk about work. And on top of that, I don't want to go out to dinner with a colleague or coworker after dinner. This is my team, but not my family. I'm really clear on that. So I want to go home and see my real family at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at all these people saying this guy's empathetic, and he's not giving me any cues or clues that he's empathetic. And finally, I just sit there kind of staring at him, and he breaks the silence, and he says, there's one thing I do. When I'm walking around the office, I'm asking folks, so what are you working on? Well, tell me more about that. Well, how can I help you? Mm-hmm. Where do you want to go in your career? How can I help you get there? He takes the one topic of work, the only thing he really wants to talk about, and he gets genuinely curious about everybody on his team. And the light bulb goes off for me that curiosity and empathy are experienced in many ways the same way. So if we want to become more of an empathetic leader, curiosity is also one of the pathways to get there.
Yeah.
Plus it makes us smarter. It tests out our assumptions when we're curious, and we're not making bad bets because we're getting other people's thinking. People feel heard. People feel connected. People feel appreciated. We're viewed as humble. It just makes us better all the way around if we do it.
Yeah.
So it's great. And the starting place is really being able to ask good questions. Mm. That's the key. When, I'll get to it in a little bit, but I have some best practice questions here that I'm going to offer for people that really want to get curious. I'm going to actually give folks some questions, like try out these. That can help a lot.
Yeah. I love what you said on 2 points, especially with this leader, because number one, it's taking the overall organizational goals and making them really personal, right? It's allowing that team member to express how they feel like they contribute to that overall goal. So I love that. The other thing that's interesting to me about that is the investment of time. If I'm sitting down with you and I'm asking these questions, I'm investing my time into hearing your answer, which is, I also feel like, is a barrier breaker, right? The fact that you asked me what I'm working on, am I enjoying it? Do I need help? Do I have everything that I need? That to me as a team member would be super important coming from a leader.
Yeah, and I think the most important starting place for curiosity when we're doing it right is to model exactly what you just did. You heard what I said, and then you reacted to something that I said.
Okay.
That's the number one starting place. So when I talk about questions, you don't just write a list of questions, ask the question, the person gives you an answer, you write it down, you go on to the next thing. That's what researchers do. But they're trying to, a good researcher's not trying to get into the relationship because they don't want to cloud the responses. We're actually trying to do the opposite. We're trying to build a relationship with the people around us.
Yeah.
So we want to invest and say, oh, I like this, or I heard this, tell me more about that. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you a great example of what we want to do, why I'm saying it's not the first question, it's the second and the third and the fourth question. So everyone listening right now, we're early in the year, and I could say to you, hey, what's that big vacation that you've got planned for this summer? Okay. So I don't know, Whitney, maybe you've got one, but just make up one if you don't. What's something you got planned? What's a vacation or holiday or something that you might want to do later this year?
Let's go to Montana.
Let's go to Montana. Great. Okay. Excellent. All right. So I asked the question
is that where the buffalo
vacation.
Are?
What?
Aren't there buffalo in Montana?
Yeah, I think there's buffalo in Montana.
That's what I want to go see.
Okay. Whitney wants to go see buffalo.
Farm. All the buffalo. Okay, yes.
All right, so
I needed to build it.
I asked the question, what's a vacation place you want to go to? You said Montana. I got this thing for buffalo. There's probably therapy for that, by the way, Whitney. But we'll talk about that later. So now at this point, I'm actually not really, I can't check the box off that I'm curious. So I want to be clear. Just because I asked that one question doesn't mean I'm curious.
Okay.
At this point, a little decision tree pops up. I can either now be curious, or I can say what I think is the worst phrase in the modern American language. Good for you. You want to kill curiosity and kill any conversation? Yeah. Use good for you. Because what good for you really says is, You seem really interested in that. I could care less about Montana or buffaloes.
Because that's what I would get that.
So let's talk about something I want to talk about. When people use that, it's typically because they don't know how to or don't want to engage in your answer, and it's almost dismissive, and they want to change the topic. Okay, good for you never yields like a rich conversation after it. Okay, so if I really want to be curious, then I would ask a follow-up question. Montana, why Montana, Whitney? How'd you pick that place?
In all the pictures, it looks really remote and relaxing, and the sky is clear. And I think it'd be really great to have a cabin and watch some buffalo.
Have a cabin, watch buffalo. So
Yes.
when you think of relaxing, what does
Yes.
relaxing mean to you?
No cell phone service.
Okay.
No cell phone service. And I would dumb that down a little bit and take it, kind of hone it in. A cup of coffee in my hand, reading a book out on a porch.
In a beautiful scenic place
Yes.
that's remote and kind of disconnected.
Yes.
Right? So you get this beautiful view, close to nature, coffee in your hand, book, quiet, peaceful.
Yes.
Other than the buffalo.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So hopefully everyone listening heard what I did there. You gave an answer, Montana. I asked more about Montana. Then you said relaxing. I was curious what you meant by that. So I said, what does relaxing mean to you? And then now I understand what you mean by relaxing. So now I learned a little bit more. Do you feel more heard or appreciated?
I do.
Okay. I hope that was a legitimate answer.
I felt like I could justify the buffalo.
The point is to listen to what people say and respond. So you're not thinking about what you want to say. You're listening to what they say, and you're saying, "Oh, I'm curious about that. Tell me more about that." Okay, so and that's a great way to build relationships, understand about another person, so you can learn more about their needs, their wants, their feelings. As I told you, I didn't grow up. I didn't get a lot of that, so it's how you can learn those things about another person. But you also just learn important information about that person by asking those follow-up questions. And it's not hard, and it doesn't take very long. The problem with us as type A personalities, particularly when we've been successful, is we get stuck in this hubris, this idea that, I'm successful because I'm super smart. I have all the answers to life. And so my assumptions aren't assumptions. They're actually fact. Why test it? So we never ask questions. We never get curious. I look at you and I go, well, this is somebody who would want to go on a bougie shopping trip. I don't really think that about you, but I would make up something about you and just assume that's truth, and then I'd move on.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, I wonder what her answer is. So it's suspending that. And curiosity is absolutely the key if we want to build connected, engaged relationships with our team members. Because asking the right questions, we can learn about what they're thinking, how to support them, where they want to go, how we can help them get there, all those things so they can feel supported and able to do the job we want them to do. It's critical for relationship building. We want to build relationships with peers. So you got other senior leaders, other vice presidents. We want to ask questions about their business, what they're working on, so we can learn how to pass the ball, help them be successful. And it's really, really critical in our personal relationships with our significant others, so we can learn more about them, and we constantly view them as a kind of a fun puzzle to solve, kind of a fun gift we get to open every day, versus something boring and static. I mean, we are people, we're complicated, we have lots of things we can learn about each other. So it helps us to build all those relationships. So I'm a very big fan of it, and there's important things we can get out of it.
Yeah. I love that back and forth, because what I really said out of all that had nothing to do with the buffalo at all. What you learned is, I like quiet time. I value it. I enjoy reading, and I enjoy coffee. So I would totally take that too, where if a team member crushed a goal and you're looking to give them a little gift, or maybe, if it's a parent-child relationship or a romantic relationship, you heard, I like books and I like coffee. That's a great little coffee gift card.
Exactly. I learned, and so if we were working together, I would say, I know what a little fun gift to get her. Right? And I also know that, and I learned also in this, if I want to make a more playful, fun gift, a stuffed buffalo would be a fantastic gift to give you. So there's a lot of things I learned from that.
Yeah.
And then you can play off of that, which further shows I was listening. And then I was listening so much, and I care about you so much, I actually took action to go do this thing to kind of keep the conversation going.
Yeah. If this fits in, I'd love you to kind of explain a little bit. You have an article that you wrote where you were talking about why leaders need to love. And it being February, I was like, this is perfect. But you really compare like the curiosity component versus arm length leadership, and that leaders feel arm length leadership is safer, especially when it comes to time of like, what if I have to let this person go and I'm going to feel like some level of connection. So how does that play into curiosity?
So, okay, I just laid out how to be curious. I've already laid out the purpose of curiosity and all the benefits. There's no argument. It is a superpower. If you're exceptional at curiosity, you're exceptional at sales, you're exceptional at relationships, you make the best strategic decisions because you always vet them and validate them with other smart people. You never guess wrong. You are perfectly perfect, frankly, if you can master this skill. That's how powerful it is. And yet so few people do it because it is scary and it feels vulnerable. So it's a completely different muscle because you're acknowledging when you ask those questions by nature, by definition, you're acknowledging I don't have this answer. So I wanted to state that because that ties into the questions you just asked. Why do leaders not do this? Because doing this effectively is acknowledging I don't have this answer. And leaders think wrongly, I'm the leader, therefore I'm supposed to have the answer. No. You're the conductor of the orchestra. You're not even supposed to be playing an instrument. You're not supposed to be the whole orchestra. Ding dong. You're supposed to ask right questions. You're supposed to facilitate a beautiful piece of art. But that's not what we think. So therefore we don't ask questions because we think it's a sign that I don't know what I'm doing. Versus, wow, this is an opportunity for me to gain all this knowledge from all these people. As a mentor of mine shared with me years ago, we all hold a piece of the truth. And so, you can be curious and ask these questions. And it'll actually make it, done right, it can actually make it better when you do have to have those difficult conversations. Because you can say to the person, I know you, I see you, I care about you. This business decision has to happen, but it has nothing to do with you and me. Now what can I do to help you go to wherever you want to go next? And so the relationship is maintained and intact, and you've done it in a graceful, positive way, and still made the tough call. And everybody's left better off because of it. Yeah. So it's just really, really powerful and important.
That's beautiful. And I love that analogy. That was perfect. I could totally picture that.
Okay. So let me spend a little bit of time. As a therapist, so the training as a therapist is a couple things. Naturally, questions. So the difference between a therapist and a coach, coaches are allowed to give advice. Therapists are not supposed to ever give advice, in theory. Because if you start giving advice to your patients or clients as a therapist, you could set up a codependent relationship. They'll call you all the time wanting you to tell them what to do. And they say, well, my therapist said ... And so therapists are trained to ask good questions so that that patient or client can find the answers within themselves. They're also trained to reflect back what they heard. So here's what I'm hearing you say, or here's what I heard in this, which again, you're seeing me do, but I'm doing it in a more pointed way. So when we apply this same skill in business, we're asking questions and reflecting back what we heard because we're trying to get something. Trying to learn more about that person, or we're trying to ask more questions about a situation or a business strategy, for example, that we're trying to vet or test. Okay, so I've got some questions. I'm going to start off with some general great questions that I think are great for all managers and leaders. So if you're saying, yeah, Brandon, I want to get better at curiosity, the starting place is asking good questions. Maybe you're not quite ready to do what I just did and kind of lean in and ask questions and reflect back and ask more questions about what you heard. Although everyone should practice that on a date night. It's really powerful. Here's some great business questions. So let's say you've got a direct report who's been on your team. Maybe they've been on your team a couple of years. Maybe they're still pretty new. Great question to ask. What is something about you that I don't know that I probably should? So.
Oh, God.
Whitney, I have known you a long time. This may be tricky. What is something about you that I don't know that I probably should?
That is hard once you've known someone so long.
Yeah. I'll help you out.
Oh my goodness.
What is something in the category of food that I don't know about you that I probably should?
I like oysters.
I didn't know that.
Okay.
Like oysters. Any raw oysters or Rockefeller?
Whatever. If it's done correctly, I'll pretty much eat any type of oyster.
So they could be cooked, they could be raw.
Yes. If it's raw, I have to have like special sauces.
So what do you put on it? Do you put like a vinegar? Do you do like the hot sauce?
Hot sauce is good. Okay. Cocktail sauce is good. Years ago, I still remember this restaurant. We were at a gig in one of the Carolinas.
Oh, that's where you'd want to go.
And
coastal.
Yes. And well, it was really cool because there were they would put different type of sauces in syringes. And so you would like the little droppers, I should say. And so you could test each one. And it was like 5 different flavors. That was amazing. I would totally go back there just for that restaurant. I guess I need to remember specifically which state it was in, but yes.
So now what I learned about you is next time we go out to a dinner or something, and if they've got oysters on the menu, I'm not even going to ask. I'm ordering those. And you're going to be like, how did you know? Well, because I asked you. I learned, right? So to that end, a really great thing that we often do with our elementary school kids, with teachers, is teachers will put out their form each year on these are my favorite things.
Okay.
To avoid getting 50 coffee cups at the end of the year.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So they cannot get another coffee cup and they can get other things. That could be something that you could even do with your own team. I've encouraged nonprofits to do that with staff, like have them fill out their forms. And the funny thing is people forget they fill out the form. And then when holidays come or birthdays come and they get all their favorite things, they're like, how did you know? Well, I asked you is how I knew. So it really avoids guessing and guessing wrong. And people feel so appreciated and heard. And it's frankly so much more efficient. Now I know you like oysters. I don't even have to ask now. I can just order them. You'll be like, that's great. Okay. So that's a great first question. What's something about you that I don't know that I probably should? You could work that in. I use this at the end of every meeting or conversation. So we're not at the very end right now, but I'm going to ask it anyway to you. And I usually wait till there's about 5 minutes left. Okay. So what did we not talk about today that we probably should have? So is there anything about curiosity that we haven't talked about today that you're kicking around in your head that maybe we should have?
What if you are trying to be curious and the other person is not open to said curiosity? So they're kind of like
great question.
Shut down.
So they're not comfortable. So it's not an issue of you not wanting to be vulnerable. It's an issue of them not wanting to be vulnerable.
Yes.
There could be a lot of reasons for that. So we want to look at context. Do they feel like you're trying to sell them something? It's in a business setting and you've got a reputation as someone who's salesy. And they're like, she's trying to sell me something. So that could be it.
Okay.
It could be that they're very introverted and they're just very reserved. And maybe they don't know you very long. They've only known you 25 years and they know you another 25 more. But there could be that too. Or it could be that something else is going on in their world right now. So if you get that, don't take it personal. Just kind of be curious about the interaction. And you can do that kind of in your own head in this case. So I'm curious. That's interesting. They didn't respond. Most people, if you get curious about them and ask them easy softball questions like vacations and things, they're going to jump right in. Okay. And in the history of the planet, never has someone not responded to the question of or the statement of, tell me more about that. Right out of the therapist playbook. If someone's talking and you're not sure what else to ask the direct report, just say, tell me more about that. They will tell you more about that. So it's another great way if you're just wanting more information, if you want to try and get them going. So, but that's a great question, Whitney. We've talked about this on the show a million times. I want to lay it out there. Important for us as managers and leaders. What can I start doing, stop doing, and continue doing to support you better? Also a really good question. So you can learn more about what you're doing. You're getting feedback, which again is vulnerable. So people avoid that question. And instead they just guess. And they could be guessing wrong, but no one wants to tell their manager they're guessing wrong. So then everyone gets frustrated. Well, gosh, don't let that happen. Ask them, what can I start doing, stop doing, or continue doing? And I always recommend, if you're going to do that, make sure that you let the person know that you're going to do that, so they're aware. And then a couple other sets of questions. So those are good general manager questions. Other questions you can ask, and this would come either if you're trying to get a better sense of, I call these visioning questions, okay, or strategy questions. If you're trying to get a better sense of where the individual wants to go or where that organization's going. So I'll often ask these questions when I'm doing discovery calls, when I'm doing a new speaking engagement, for example. I'm trying to learn what the organization needs. So you can use a crystal ball question. So if it's speaking engagement, I'm talking to somebody, I'll say, okay, let's say it's right after the speaking engagement. I just finished. And we're walking out of the room and you say to yourself, and I'm talking to the person who's hired me, you say to yourself, wow, that was exactly what we wanted. What would that look like? What would you want people either thinking, feeling, or doing to lead you to say, wow, that was perfect? And so they go, oh. And then they give me all these words. And then now I know this is the things that I need to be including in that engagement. So the audience is coming away feeling that way or thinking that way. And so, yeah, folks, it's no surprise that when I finish these speaking engagements, they're like, that was perfect. You were amazing. Well, maybe my delivery was nice. And this is less of a pat on the back on me as more it is, I just asked the right questions. I didn't walk into that room guessing. I knew exactly what they wanted to get out of that. I delivered on exactly what they asked for. And so they were happy. So asking visioning questions can help. And then the other visioning question you can ask is magic wand. So I've got my crystal ball, which is fun, and I got my magic wand. If you could wave your magic wand and change anything around here, what would you change? Also helps you get a good sense of maybe what's broken or what you can go work on or something you can hone in on. Helps you learn a little more about pain point. So we're learning more about kind of ideal outcome, and we're also learning about kind of pain point. So questions around that are all good. Okay, I've been talking for a little while. I'm going to pause. Anything that I haven't talked about as it relates to curiosity, as you're thinking about how to get better at it?
How about the timing on this and how many touch points are needed, right? So like when you were giving that example of that CEO that was stopping by everyone's desk, it sounds like that's a regular practice that he has, is to walk around and kind of connect with his team. I'd love to hear the significance of that and how many times you have to touch someone, and then for them, to take, because the goal of this is, of course, is to go a little deeper, right? So for each conversation, you're able to take the conversation a little bit deeper and learn more about that person.
Super great question. Depends upon your role and relationship with that person.
Okay.
I love that you asked that question because we're getting not only how to do it, but when. If you're the CEO, one really kind of intimate, connected conversation, it can be enough. You don't have to do another one. If you've got 50,000 employees, you don't need to make a point to say, wow, I'm going to check in with Whitney every quarter. You don't have to do that. You've got too many people. But they'll feel really appreciated and connected and trust you that you took your time out to connect with someone that you don't work with on a regular basis. Now, if you're the manager, one time is not going to gain you points. You're going to need to do more than that. So I would recommend, something. Generally, always hold a spirit of curiosity when you're working with direct reports. You want to be doing more asking of questions than telling, because that's where you learn information. That's where you learn how are things going based on what I asked them to do. What obstacles are they running into? And how can I help in that? So you learn more about the actual work that's being done. But I would say some of these other questions, you might want to, some of these that are more like getting to know the person a little bit more, sprinkle those in, kind of every quarter. Okay. But making curiosity more of your regular muscle as a manager will help you a lot. But we want to use it intentionally. If we've got a big project, we don't need to ask necessarily about where do you want to go on vacation this year. We might say, okay, what are your concerns about the project? What resources do you need on the project? What can I be doing to support you? Has anyone caused you any issues up to this point, or any roadblocks or blockers that I might need to go talk to? When do you think we need to talk about this again? So you can give me updates, because I don't want to, get in your kitchen, but I also don't want to be so distant that if you need help, I'm not available.
Yeah.
So there's lots of questions you can ask, all curious, helping to kind of create a really good game plan. So again, it just depends upon context.
So before we started the show, we were talking about, because I'd asked you, do you feel like people just kind of randomly open up to you like you've never met them before? Maybe it's your server at a restaurant. We were talking about the Uber driver, right? How does approachability play into this? Like a little bit of your presence coming into the room almost and setting you up for the fact that this is a person I can be vulnerable with.
That's the key right there. So that is a really important statement. This is a person I could be vulnerable with. So if I come in like serious, grumpy, and maybe I've got, in clinical terms, we'd say a flat affect, right? I'm happy. I'm sad. It's just the same expression all the time. In absence of communication, people assume the worst. So if you come in with that kind of flat affect, it doesn't feel approachable, and you start asking questions, people are going to experience it as you're interrogating them. So you've got to make sure you're trying as best you can to have a little more of an inviting persona, a little more relaxed. If that's not your style, then clearly state upfront why you're asking questions. I'm going to ask a few questions. I just really want to get to know you a little better. You don't have to answer them if you're not comfortable, but it's really just for me to know you better, know how I can support you. Set up kind of a context for that. You make a good point around this that I want to extend upon. The one question we want to be really careful to avoid, and I actually used this sentence stem earlier, and I noticed I did it, but it was okay because we have a good relationship, and you didn't notice it. But it's a dangerous opening question, sentence stem. Why? Why'd you wear that blazer today? Immediately, you're like, what's wrong with this blazer? I like this blazer. It's a good-looking blazer. I paid $500 for this blazer. You probably didn't pay $500, but you know what I mean? So it immediately puts us on the defensive, because why is a critical question. I'm now critiquing your thinking. I'm judging your thinking. Why'd you do this? Why'd you fulfill the customer's request that way? Why'd you fill out the report this way? Why'd you make that decision? It is an implied judgment to it. Now, there's a time and place to do that. Maybe you need to help someone improve their critical thinking, and you're going to tell them, I'm going to ask a series of why questions. Fine. Or you're trying to hone in on something that went wrong, and you're the CEO, and you want to kind of dig into what went wrong. Well, why? And then there's a time and place for it. But if you do it in relationships that you're trying to build, it will set up a defensive dynamic. You don't want to go home and say, why'd you make that for dinner? That will not yield to a productive evening with your significant other. You may be wondering why they made that for dinner, but you can walk in instead and go, smells good in here. I'm curious. What'd you make for dinner today? This is different than usual. And you can ask it in a different way, which is a little more inviting.
Yeah.
So I think you make a great point around approachability.
Okay. This is great. I love the practical steps to be able to dive in and get curious.
Yeah. There's probably things you and I haven't covered today. So if people are listening to this today and you want to get better at curiosity, it is a superpower. I have developed it over a long period of time, both by going through and getting degrees and training in it, but also just because I had such a deep desire and need for it, because I was so isolated growing up. I was deprived of any kind of real interaction, particularly with my parents, which was hard because I was living with them every day. It's one thing to be deprived of that when they're off in another country or they've passed away, but when you're with them, it makes it that much harder, a little more painful. So I have a deep desire for this. So there may be things that I naturally do that I don't think about. So if you're listening to this right now and you've got questions for us, comment, post, reach out to us. I would love to answer them. It's something that I think that if we can get better at this, if you who are listening can get better at this, all of your relationships not only will improve, your decision making will improve, and people's trust in you will improve. So you're going to make better decisions, enhance your trust, and have better relationships. I don't see why we wouldn't want to get better at that. So be thinking about what maybe you could take away from our conversation here with Whitney, and put that in play starting today, so you and your team can be that much better tomorrow.